we'll just go to our panel session now. So I just didn't know if Andrew, you might want to respond to this, or Don. Do you think that there might be some higher incentives sometime in the future for biodiversity plantings where there are, you know, I suppose heavy pest pressures or things like that, or how do you weigh up those decisions when you're making the offer?
Yeah, I think there is scope to accommodate those sorts of things. I mean, it gets hard because there's so much variability both between regions and even within regions. So designing a system that is high enough level to be applied broadly, but then sufficiently sensitive to local conditions is a bit of a challenge. And some of the things that Kerry raised, and hi Kerry, we've met before and spoken.
Yeah, we have.
Some of those, like the issue about the woodlands, you know, those sorts of areas are not well catered for in carbon biodiversity because of the nature of the carbon method. They're very well suited to the ERV, to the Enhancing Remnant Vegetation Pilot. And I think we probably could have done a better job in some of our comms. That's our communications. That's not absolutely not directed at the NRM groups. That's directed at us, at our end. And trying to communicate stuff up front, to carry it as a landholder to be able to see, oh, look, that area immediately is not well suited to this program, but it's better suited to the other program. At the time, we couldn't offer that to Kerry because we didn't have two programs running side by side, but I think it's something we could have done a better job at and need to think about doing in the future.
Can I just say there that one of the issues with that, I guess, was that you got more rewards if you had mature trees in your application. So it's sort of, you know, yeah.
Yeah, and just make it one of our fault is not making it really clear that some of those areas are just, you know, like the 10 stems per hectare are not well suited to this, and not the way that it was designed. And I think that's on us.
Thanks very much, Andrew. I've got another question here, but I would also just remind people that if you do want to ask a question direct now, you can put up your virtual yellow hand, not your actual real live hand, but your virtual yellow hand. So I've got a question here from Orion. It's, do you think this program would be applicable up in far north Queensland, where fire is an important method of land management? Does leaf litter or logs form part of your calculations for how much carbon is stored in an area? I think that one's probably directed to Andrew or Don.
Yeah, I can answer that one if you like. There is a carbon method that relates to savanna burning, and it now has a variant that does include coarse woody debris in the carbon pools that are considered. So that's possible. The biodiversity benefit of undertaking those sorts of fire projects is sort of somewhat more contested than the benefit of adding trees to intensive ag landscapes. So it's a bit more complicated. So I suppose it's a caveated, yes, it could potentially work, but generally they're at a much larger scale, and there's a lot more that needs to be thought about when you're thinking about fire projects as to what benefit you'll give to biodiversity. There's that same guy, Andrew, making the same noise.
I know, Queensland, amazing. I think the other part of that question was, if you do carry out burning, do you need to account for it? And that's how I interpret it anyway. And the short answer to that is, yeah, you do under the method. If you carry out any prescribed burning under the carbon method, that is, you're required to measure that and account for the modelled emissions associated with those sorts of prescribed burning events.
Thanks very much, Andrew. Now, this is a question to anyone on the panel, or more than one person on the panel might like to answer this one. So, based on the C+B pilot, what sorts of outcomes or incentives do you think farmers could hope for in the future, and where do you see this going?
Oh, that's a tough one. My general pattern in relation to that, or response to that, is that farmers are a diverse lot. You get them in all shapes and sizes, and they're motivated by many different things. So in my view, what we ultimately need is a bit of the bistro, a smorgasbord of offerings in this space, across pure carbon through to pure biodiversity and multiple offerings in between. And only when we're able to offer that suite of options to farmers will we able to accommodate and pick up all the potential options that lie in this space. And I think the task of people on our side of the fence, or the fence I'm on today, is to come up with and push those, and just push the design of those opportunities and see whether we can get them up.
Thanks, Andrew. Nick or Susan,
Rachel,
would you like to? Oh, thanks, Nick. Susan, you've jumped in too.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I mean, we had 10 landholders, I think, here in Eyre Peninsula that were through that process, and they all varied as to their drivers to it. And, you know, ranged anywhere from the purely economic income sort of perspective right through to the more altruistic, wanting to revegetate and make a better world and the rest of it. But I think, like, I know one of them in particular, it was very much about where some of the farms are actually in quite marginal countries. So they're already being affected by climate change, and that's affecting their ability to actually generate income from some of their land area. So they were looking at it very much from an income diversification perspective for their next generation that's coming through. So, yeah, but I think, as you say, every farmer is unique and they all have different drivers. So.
Thanks very much. Susan, did you have anything you wanted to add, Nick? You can shake your head if you don't.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. I would, and it's probably really drawing on the last point that Susan made in her presentation, just regarding the confidence to try something new. So I think that's a really important lesson out of this. You're only going to look at some of the findings out of COP26, some of the other international movements going on around legislating things like carbon emissions and how that drives markets and appetite to invest. So I do honestly believe that in the next few years, this will be part and parcel of the way we deliver environmental programs in a more diverse fashion. And drawing on Andrew's point too around the kind of the many horses for many courses, whether it's an investment driver or whether it's a project on the ground or a need to diversify income, or a particular natural asset that you might be focusing on. So I think things like environmental condition accounting that Don talked on earlier is a really critical step in understanding what sort of productivity we have in the landscape, both from an investment potential, but the return that we get out of those natural systems and the services they provide, and how we can all harness that, I suppose, in diversifying those funding opportunities for landholders and landscapes on the ground. So, yeah, I think it's the embracing the new is something that we're certainly not unfamiliar with in NRM, but I do feel like it's at a pretty pivotal point too, in terms of things like hybrid funding models becoming more and more available and sort of mainstream.
Thanks very much, Nick. And that actually segued almost really nicely to my next question, which you've somewhat answered already. So we'll see if you've got anything to add, or Susan might like to jump in. But how big a part do you think carbon and other natural capital markets will play in funding regional NRM outcomes in the future?
I think just touching up on that confidence to try something new, that when I talked about that, it was more from our organisation perspective, but it's also been from the landholder perspective. And we've got landholders a little bit like Kerry, where the B&C didn't quite suited what they needed. So like a couple of those are actually now talking to other third providers that might sort of help with some of that more project cost up front. So they'll look at a different model. And others have spun off, and instead of looking at the ERV, because that actually suited their needs better, it helped them to work out what they actually wanted to do. But as a region, I mean, we're just scoping a project now with our partners, and we've got a threatened ecological community here that's about to be nominated in coming weeks. And it's right down to only 3% of that threatened ecological community still surviving in the landscape. And we've got landholders and others that are really passionate about trying to improve that community. So we're working at the moment, scoping almost a carbon plus biodiversity program based around recovery of one particular threatened ecological community. And if we can trial that and show that that works, you know, it's a great way of really linking in what our core business is from that natural resource management perspective to the farming community and providing economic benefits to the farming community. So again, it comes back to that confidence just to try something new now that we've explored this a little bit. So
thanks very much, Susan. I'm going to go to you and Nick again and just ask you if there was one piece of advice from participating in the pilot that you'd like to offer to the next 6 regional NRM groups that are participating, what would that advice be?
I think it's a comment you said about our community of practice, that there's no dumb questions. I really have not that much understanding of carbon farming, and this program, like, at least you're in a safe environment, you can actually ask, and the guys will take the time to actually explain everything to you. So, yeah.
Thanks very much, Susan. Nick, is there any pearls of wisdom you'd like to offer to the next lot that are coming forward?
Yeah, I think probably the real key one for us in our region is really getting, for our experience in our region, was really getting that messaging correct in terms of communicating the expectations of the pilot as best you can, notwithstanding some of the untouchable market-based drivers aspects of it. But without that side of it, it's really about trying to get the right landholder for the pilot, I think, is critical. So for us, probably the tweak in messaging would have been, you know, if you want to access a carbon market, here's a pilot for you. To probably being, if you're already interested in participating in a carbon market, then this is a pilot for you. So I think that would have helped to probably get the a higher percentage of the right people applying, as opposed to some of the ones that were probably expecting a little bit more out of it, which is exactly what Andrew raised the point before. But I think that's critical. But I think with that harnessing the power of collaboration, you've really got a brilliant opportunity for everyone to be singing the same tune nationally in terms of the pilots involved, the department, and of course ANU. And look, and sorry, just for a bonus one would be just to really utilise the people you have around you, including ANU and the department, and drawing on Sue's point around there being no dumb questions. I think that's been one of the real highlights I've found of working in this Carbon Plus Biodiversity Pilot, is access to expertise, willingness to share, and ability to respond to some of the feedback. That have been 3 of the most heartening aspects of it. Not to mention that I feel like Susan over in Eyre Peninsula is my neighbour now. So that's been really awesome too. But definitely communication's critical.
Thanks very much for that, Nick. We've got time for just maybe one more question to anyone on the panel, and maybe everyone might like to answer it, including Kerry. But if there was one thing that was what was the most exciting or inspirational thing that you've learned or that's come out of the pilot for you? Susan's still unmuted, so she's leaving herself vulnerable, but now Kerry's unmuted as well, so Kerry can go. Thank you.
I think that the government were willing to fund something with the word biodiversity in it. Was a plus. And I think the application process is, you know, what probably needs a bit of tweaking, but it's a huge step forward on every other application any farmer has to put in for anything. Yeah. Yeah.
It's great. I'm sure they're all very happy to hear that. There's some work people in the room. And
I'd agree. I would agree with Kerry on that one. I think though, for me, I think, and Nick and others have alluded to it, it showed, I think, the co-designing of this program so that we could tweak things to make it right for our region was really important. So being able to do that is something that you don't get in many national programs. You have to try and retrofit what you want to achieve out of the sort of program design. So I think that was really powerful. But I think also the other powerful thing out of this was just, just demonstrating to ANU and to Department of Ag how important natural resource management organisations across Australia are in actually getting out there and delivering on ground and linking up to these national programs. So I think that has been a really big outcome from this. And that to me is like, it's really powerful now that they've got that confidence that they've moved off from our first 6 regions. They're now trying with 6 other regions. And yeah, I think it's a great outcome. So that's it.
Couldn't agree more. If I was to asked to answer that question, I'd say almost exactly the same thing. The thing that I learned most was not only how many good landholders like Terry there are out there, but just the power of the NRM groups and the capacity that sits in the NRM groups. Incredible demonstration by them. Kate will hopefully attest that I've always been a believer in the NRM groups, but I'm now a full up gospel cheering, want to start about the absolutely crucial role that they obviously already play. But if we're going to do, if we're going to make these environmental markets work nationally, then the NRM groups, they have to be the frontline service providers for these programs, the people that make sure the numpties in Canberra like me understand what's happening in the regions and connect the programs to the regions, and then provide that linkage between the landholder and government. They're the middle people that make this whole thing work. And they're also, can I chuck in one last point? If they're also a trusted press, you know, you can put other service providers in there that are less trusted, that are there purely for profit motives. That's not the NRM groups. They're not there for that. And even the private ones like Nick's, they're not, that's not, you know, the Burnett Mary Regional Group doesn't wake up in the morning and say, how can we maximise our profits from providing service to landholders? That's not what motivates them. And that makes them different from other service providers.
Thanks, Andrew. It's really, really nice to hear. Nick or Don, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, look, without sounding like Andrew and I are sitting a job interview with NRM Regions Australia, or with Chris Norman and NRM Regions Queensland, I see he's in the webinar too. Look, I think apart from the things that have been said, which were certainly super tangible in our region as well and in my experience, the other one that I found was there was this really, really fantastic history of NRM engagement you could see in the landholders, in the way they were describing their projects, the way they're talking about their landscape, the way they understood in our area in any way was the grazing system. So it was a real testament to some of the previous programs and, you know, adds to the things that the other guys have talked about in terms of that trust, being the cold face, having the intelligence on the ground, the relationships with landholders. That was super heartening for me. It was kind of felt like year in, year out, when you're delivering projects and reporting on them, it feels very transactional, but it gave me some nice perspective because I haven't dealt with that many landholders in a fairly long chunk of time, sort of usually involved in upper program management, but to get back in touch with that, it was a real litmus test, I think, for the amount of effort that's gone into past programs, all the way back to Natural Heritage Trust 1, and to see that the legacy that's created and the way it's helped landholders understand the landscapes they work within was really, really super heartening. Yes.
Thanks heaps, Nick. That's excellent. We're almost out of time. Don, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
Just a look towards the future, I suppose. Like, we've heard that it's been a successful pilot. We made it really hard for ourselves by running it over a very short time interval and doing it in an enormous hurry. It's the tip of a massive iceberg if it's supported.
Thanks so much, Don. Look, we are going to end it here. So thanks so much to all of the great presenters and everyone that made it along today.